several Supreme Court issues were decided, three of them with the U.S. Supreme Court this morning, and one in Alabama on Friday, which just about knocked the hell out of me when I read it. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled on Friday that frozen embryos are people. And anyone can be held liable for destroying them. I mean, frozen embryos, a fertilized human egg, is now a person in Alabama. How soon before the frozen embryos will be able to get their, I don't want to say hands because they don't have any, get their, I don't know what. Anyway, get part of the embryo into ownership of an AR-15. I'm sure the Alabama Supreme Court will rule that next, that embryos have a right to keep and bear, well, to keep semi-automatic instruments of death. And what about registering to vote? How do embryos get the hell from a glass tube frozen to a polling place? They couldn't do it here in Georgia because you're not allowed to assist people standing online waiting to vote. This is fucking obscene and insane, obscene and insane. But once again, I mean, please, people, please, if you practice the Christian religion, bless your heart. If you practice it the way I think the mythologizers who wrote the Christian Bible want you to practice it, okay, good on you, mate. I know I used to do that too, but if you're a Christian fascist, which apparently is the makeup of the Alabama Supreme Court, they're now ruling that a goddamn glop of what? Slime is a human being. Now this decision, calm down, Malloy, this decision by the Alabama Supreme Court is one that people who advocate for a woman's right to privacy, for reproductive rights, you know the drill. Those people say that this ruling is going to destroy the idea of in vitro fertilization, IVF, in vitro meaning in glass, where an egg from a female and sperm from a male are conjoined inside a glass, for lack of a better expression here, and it becomes a fertilized egg, and then it sits there, this little glob of mucus, spit, dribble, whatever. I mean, come on. And then it's frozen. And it sits in a sub-zero container until somebody wants to extract that fertilized egg and insert it into a woman, hoping it will develop into a human being. So there goes that method of people who desperately want to be parents. It's now being flushed away by the Alabama Supreme Court because they have ruled that a fertilized egg, a frozen embryo, is a person. This is insanity. Now, no other state has ruled this way, but there are at least 11 states that have defined personhood as beginning at fertilization in their state laws. That is insane. I mean, it just staggers me that there are educated people, I assume they're educated, in this country who find themselves in the judiciary, and they can make a ruling that a glop of mucus is now a human being. There are all sorts of states nationwide, apparently, who are trying to figure out additional restrictions on women. Beat the bitches back into the kitchen and the bedroom where they belong, right? That's the idea. Take away from women their right to sexual freedom, to reproductive freedom, to the decision to maintain a pregnancy or terminate it. Take it away from them. Because the bitches are evil ever since Eve, ever since that rotten Eve told God to fuck off and ate a pomegranate. Ooh. Oh, my God. Well, every single voter in the United States better pay attention to this shit. Because in 2024, when we, in theory, decide who our next president is going to be, who our next a third of our Senate, the full House, when we decide who is going to be making these laws, we better keep this shit in mind. This is one Supreme Court, Alabama, but you can bet your booty that there will be all sorts of Christian nutcases around the country now who will jump up and shout and cheer and say, let's do that here in fill in the blank, name of the state. Now, on a federal level, U.S. Supreme Court is going to decide this term whether to limit access to the abortion drug, so-called. Mifepristone, I always mispronounce it, mifepristone, which is the so-called morning after pill. The Supreme Court is going to decide whether or not people can have access to a drug that has proven itself to be safe and effective. It does what it is designed to do. Madness. We are so close to totalitarianism, Christian fascism in this country. We're so close to A Handmaid's Tale, to Margaret Atwood's books, to Orwell's writings, to Huxley's writings. The Alabama case focused on whether a patient who mistakenly dropped a container that contained frozen embryos from other people, frozen embryos, little globs of snot, whether that person could be held liable in a wrongful death lawsuit. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled that the person who dropped and destroyed these frozen embryos could be held liable in a wrongful death lawsuit. And the Alabama Supreme Court wrote that it had long held that, quote, unborn children are children, end quote. And by extension now, they said that's also true for frozen embryos, which gives this fertilized egg. You could have 1 million of them in a cup and you wouldn't be able to determine what the hell it was. You might look at it and say, Jesus Christ, somebody blew their nose in here. But it now gives fertilized eggs the same protection as living babies under the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act in Alabama. This is what the court wrote, in part, quote, it applies to all children, born and unborn, without limitation. It is not the role of this court to craft a new limitation based on our own view of what is or is not wise public policy. That is especially true where, as here, the people of this state have adopted a constitutional amendment directly aimed at stopping courts from excluding so-called unborn life from legal protection, end quote, which is Christian evangelical gobbledy shit. That's all that is. It's garbage talk. Garbage talk. And the decision by the Alabama Supreme Court, in fact, overruled an appellate court ruling in that state. And the appellate court had dismissed the whole goddamn suit because the appellate court in Alabama said, embryos are not children, you dumb fucks. I mean, they probably didn't say dumb fucks, but embryos are not children. It doesn't fit the definition of a child. So apparently there are appellate court judges in Alabama who are still sane. But the Alabama Supreme Court is so far over the edge now. What's next? Like I said, what's next? Well, deciding that embryos are allowed to have AR-15s. And the embryos are afforded the right to vote. Now, in the vaunted state of Alabama, God damn, I hate that place. I mean, I really do. And I live in a state that shares a border with Alabama. Every time I used to go to the beach in Florida, in the Florida Panhandle, which I no longer do because I hate the state of Florida now, not people that live in it. There, a lot of people live in Florida that I love. But the state of Florida is so fucked up. And the state of Alabama is so fucked up. But when I used to go to the beach in the Florida Panhandle, I would take a shortcut and drive through Alabama. And as soon as I crossed the state line from Georgia into Alabama, I got the creepy crawlies. I mean, I had feelings going up and down my spine. What the fuck are you doing here, Malloy? Leave. Take the next exit. Get out of Alabama. There's something about that state. I had experiences there when I was on the road, when I was a teenager, drifting around the South. Maybe that's it. But anyway, in 2018, voters in Alabama, voters in Alabama passed a ballot measure that granted fetuses full personhood rights. But even that madness did not recognize frozen embryos. And after the Supreme Court ruled against Roe v. Wade, a near total abortion ban went into effect in Alabama. And Alabama now accounts, according to the Washington Post, Alabama now accounts for nearly half of all criminal cases in the United States related to pregnancy. Half of all criminal cases. A woman miscarries. And the immediate question in Alabama, did you just kill that baby? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.